I'm Greg Brown for Newsmax TV Money. We're talking today with Steve Forbes, President and Chief Executive Officer of Forbes and Editor-in-Chief of Forbes magazine. Welcome, sir.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
Is the bailout dead and gone?
The bailout is dead for now, and you're going to see the financial markets tank. You saw the Dow in a free fall today. The end of today, you're going to see the financial markets tomorrow take a huge hit. We'll see what the Senate does on Wednesday. But if something isn't done, then the financial system will go into cardiac arrest, and we'll have something we haven't seen since the early 1930s.
Wow. So I guess that means that government action was absolutely necessary in the first place.
Well, government action helped precipitate the crisis, everything from a weak dollar to crazy rules on short selling, making it easier, crazy rules on accounting, and things like that have brought about the crisis, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And now we have a disaster on our hands. And while this bill is not perfect, it's got all of us could have written it better. When it's the only thing we have, and when a patient is about to die, you take emergency measures, even if you could do better in more calmer circumstances.
Let's talk about origins, the real problems with the banking system. You were mentioning some of them just a moment ago. Some blame housing declines, some of them blame exotic financing instruments on Wall Street. What do you think are the two or three big levers that are moving things here in terms of this mess?
The biggest one was the weak dollar. The Federal Reserve printing too many dollars starting 4 years ago. The bubble never would have reached the size it did without the Fed doing that. It's the equivalent of a bartender. You shouldn't drink too much, but if the bartender makes every hour happy hour and sells drinks at 25 cents a pop, you're going to have some bad results. You also had the Securities and Exchange Commission do away with what they call the uptick rule in short selling, which meant you can't short sell a stock unless it's gone up. Instead, they let people pile on. They didn't enforce rules against other abuses of short selling. Then you have this crazy accounting rule called mark-to-market. A long story short on that, what it did was have banks and insurance companies artificially mark down the value of assets. Even though there was no market, they had to pretend there was one, which meant you couldn't sell the stuff, so you had to mark it way down. And that meant you had to get more capital, which meant that you were going to the markets and taking more losses, and the thing just fed on itself, like putting fuel on a fire.
You mentioned the loose dollar. You've been a critic of that in the past. Do you see a rate cut coming, maybe an emergency cut from the Fed? And if so, what might happen then?
I think you'll see an emergency cut. I think you'll see the central banks around the world pump in hundreds of billions of dollars to try to keep the system going until Wednesday. And, of course, in terms of villains, we got to mention Freddie and Fannie. They helped fan the flames of subprime mortgages, of giving mortgages to people who couldn't afford them, to people who would be delinquent from the time they signed the mortgage. Fannie and Freddie wrote $600 billion of that stuff. So they helped fan the crisis, create the crisis. And so we got to mention them as villains. So the government had a big role in this. Yes, there are bad behavior on Wall Street, but by golly, it couldn't have reached the disastrous proportion it has without the crazy policies of Washington, Federal Reserve, Congress, and I must say the White House.
I'm here from the government, and I'm here to help you, as usual. What's your view, medium term, on stocks?
Well, stocks right now, the only thing you can do is stand on the sidelines, because this thing is like a knife or a rock falling through the air, you can't catch it. And so you have to have faith that at some point these people will come to their senses and do things that have to be done to stabilize the patient, and then we can take positive measures like a strong dollar, like tax cuts, to get our economy in shape so that it can start to recover next year. But right now, we got to make sure the patient doesn't die. It's in cardiac arrest, and the doctors decide to take a recess.
John McCain has been warning of a potential depression if Barack Obama is elected because of the new spending the senator has proposed. McCain is running a political campaign, of course, but I'd like your take on that idea.
Well, unfortunately, Senator Barack Obama is proposing financial policies that would hurt the economy, starting with raising taxes, especially on businesses. Small businesses would be hurt by his Social Security big tax increase, raising taxes on capital, which businesses need to grow and create new jobs. So Yes, he would make the situation worse, and he's already proposed, as you know, about $800 billion in new spending programs. He hasn't. He says he'll get the money from closing loopholes, which means he's going to print it.
Yeah. What, if anything, have Henry Paulson and Ben Bernanke done right so far?
Well, at least they recognized the direness of the situation, and I've been very critical of how they've handled this crisis. But they're the doctors there, so give them what they need to stabilize the patient, then we'll take it from there with the American people.
Finally, recession in 2009?
We're already in it now. It started this summer. September is bad month, and the fourth quarter of this year is going to be rather ugly. And but if we start doing things right now, next year we can lay the foundations for recovery. But right now, we're in a recession.
We've been talking today with Steve Forbes, President and Chief Executive Officer of Forbes and Editor-in-Chief of Forbes magazine. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm Greg Brown for Newsmax TV Money.